The hidden narrative of cannabis cowboys in the Wild West explore the rugged terrain of the Wild West, where cowboys galloped, outlaws reigned, and an unexpected secret flourished: cannabis. From Mexican laborers to defiant frontiersmen, this plant transcended its medicinal use to become a fundamental aspect of life. How did it influence the Old West, and why has it been overlooked? Join us as we delve into the concealed history of cannabis cowboys and the role of marijuana in the Old Wild West. Before we proceed, please remember to like and subscribe to our channel. In the 16th century, cannabis made its way to the Western Hemisphere, introduced by Spaniards who brought it to Chile primarily for fiber production. In North America, the Spanish also cultivated cannabis, focusing on hemp across various farms. During the early colonial era, hemp emerged as a vital crop for farmers. Alongside tobacco, it became a significant export long before the American Revolution began. This trend started in 1611 when the first settlers of Jamestown, Virginia, transported several plants across the Atlantic. By 1619, King James I urged the American colonists in Jamestown to enhance their cultivation efforts for the benefit of England. The Virginia Company, which managed Jamestown, instructed landowners to grow and send 100 hemp plants to meet England's demands. Over time, colonists expanded their hemp farming to strengthen England's foothold in the Americas. The cultivation of cannabis was instrumental in shaping the early development of what would eventually become the United States. Notably, George Washington himself grew hemp at Mount Vernon as one of his primary crops. Throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, hemp was widely used for producing rope and fabric across the nation. Following the introduction of cannabis to New England in 1629, it became a vital agricultural product in North America, remaining so until after the Civil War. Hemp played a crucial role in both colonial society and the early economic frameworks of the United States. In 1775, Kentucky began its hemp cultivation, and by the 19th century, extensive hemp farms had developed in states such as Mississippi, Georgia, California, South Carolina, and Nebraska. In addition to its industrial applications, cannabis gained prominence in the field of medicine. By 1839, Irish physician William O'Shaughnessy brought cannabis into Western medical practice after witnessing its therapeutic uses in India. He proved its efficacy in relieving muscle spasms and pain, as well as in treating ailments like migraines and sleep disorders. Cannabis quickly became a widely used remedy for pain relief until the advent of aspirin led to a decline in its popularity. During this time, there was a growing push for the regulation of medicinal sales. States implemented laws to tackle issues such as mislabeled medications, undisclosed narcotics, and improper sales practices. These regulations often mandated clear labeling of hazardous substances or restricted their sale to licensed pharmacies with a physician's prescription. Some laws also prohibited the sale of these medicines to minors and limited the number of prescription refills. The objective of these measures was to enhance consumer safety while managing the distribution of potentially harmful drugs, including cannabis. A bulletin from the United States Department of Agriculture during this era indicated that 29 states had established laws regarding cannabis. States like Wisconsin and Louisiana required a doctor's prescription for cannabis sales, while others, such as Nebraska and New York, mandated labeling but did not specify restricted drugs. In New York, cannabis was initially categorized as a poison under legislation enacted in 1860, following several suicides linked to substances later classified as poisons. The initial version of this legislation banned the sale of cannabis unless accompanied by a written prescription from a doctor. However, the final iteration allowed sales without a prescription. as long as the purpose of the purchase and the buyer's information were documented. All packaging was mandated to feature the word poison in bold red letters. In states where cannabis was not classified under poison regulations, there were still persistent attempts to control its sale and consumption. In 1880, a legislative proposal in California aimed to regulate the sale of opium and other narcotic substances, including hemp-based products. Nevertheless, this initiative was retracted in favor of a bill that concentrated exclusively on opium. Despite this setback, further legislation concerning hemp-derived drugs was proposed before the century concluded. Between California and the Mississippi River, a lack of regulation was evident, as many territories and newly formed states experienced lawlessness, leaving local authorities without any prohibitions against cannabis cultivation or usage. Historians have observed that cannabis, being a wind-pollinated species, flourished in human-modified environments, such as fields cleared of trees or brush, which aptly describes the conditions of the American frontier during the mid to late 19th century. By this period, cannabis had become widely accessible in the western United States and emerged as a favored alternative to tobacco due to its plentifulness and versatility. Its use was particularly common in regions where tobacco was less available, especially in Western territories. Cannabis was more affordable and often found growing wild along roadsides, depending on the area. The extensive availability of cannabis in the Wild West represented a significant shift, as it began to be consumed mainly for its psychoactive properties rather than for medicinal reasons. This change transformed cannabis into a recreational substance, leading to the emergence of the so-called cannabis cowboys. Throughout the 19th century, as irrigation projects altered the landscape of the western United States, Mexican laborers played a crucial role in introducing cannabis to new areas in the West and North. After the conclusion of the Mexican-American War, Texas became a refuge for many displaced Mexicans and individuals escaping the political unrest in Mexico. Consequently, Texas emerged as one of the initial frontier regions to experience a significant rise in recreational cannabis consumption, predominantly within working-class neighborhoods, especially among Mexican laborers. During this era, Cowboys, a group that included many African Americans and Mexicans, were among those who adopted cannabis for recreational use. Nevertheless, cannabis did not achieve widespread acceptance among the frontier settlers, who favored other substances such as alcohol, opiates, and narcotics. Cannabis also entered the United States under the name marijuana, an anglicized adaptation of the Spanish word for reefer. Its recreational use began to gain traction in the early 20th century, largely due to Mexicans fleeing the regime of President Porfirio Diaz. A prominent figure linked to cannabis during this period was Francisco Pancho Villa, the renowned Mexican revolutionary leader. Villa, celebrated for his military acumen and regarded as a Robin Hood-like figure, was also known for his appreciation of cannabis. Although many aspects of his personal life remain enigmatic, his adventures have been preserved through oral traditions and folk songs in Mexico, known as corridos. These songs often emphasize his military accomplishments and his connection to cannabis, vividly illustrating his life and legacy. The songs associated with Pancho Villa, including Adelita and La Cucaracha, portrayed him not only as a formidable military commander, but also as an individual who relished life's pleasures, including his interest in cannabis. During the Mexican Revolution, these songs became integral to the culture, enshrining Villa's deeds and lifestyle. Adelita narrates a poignant love story, while La Cucaracha emerged as Villa's anthem, celebrating his triumphs, challenges, and indulgent way of life. La Cucaracha prominently features the use of marijuana, which was prevalent among Villa's troops during the Revolution. It is estimated that around 50% of his army, including numerous Yaqui natives, utilized marijuana, often before engaging in battles, as they believed it bolstered their strength and bravery. In addition to marijuana, Villa's soldiers frequently consumed mezcal and sotol, alcoholic drinks derived from desert flora. Villa was well known for his lavish lifestyle, which contributed to his image as a charismatic leader who balanced enjoyment of life with his reputation as an astute military strategist. Despite commanding troops that were often poorly equipped and lacking training, Villa successfully executed military operations that fostered loyalty among his followers, known as the Villistas, even in times of hardship. Born Doroteo Arango, Pancho Villa's formative years were marked by poverty and adversity. He rose to prominence as an outlaw and bandit, becoming a folk hero to destitute farmers whom he frequently aided through raids on affluent haciendas. Villa was also notorious for his romantic pursuits, which included multiple marriages and relationships. However, his life underwent a revolutionary transformation in 1909, spurred by the death of his daughter and the mistreatment he suffered at the hands of a wealthy landowner, igniting his quest for social justice and leading him to join the revolutionary cause. Initially, Villa's participation in the revolution was motivated by personal gain. At that time, Mexico was rife with revolutionary factions, and Villa recognized an opportunity to benefit from looting, plundering, and violence within the Revolutionary Army. His outlook changed after he encountered Francisco Madero, a key revolutionary figure whose principles of land reform and social justice profoundly impacted Villa. Although he did not fully understand the intricacies of politics, Villa committed himself to Madero and the revolutionary cause, even as he occasionally grappled with his volatile temperament. His journey as a revolutionary was riddled with obstacles, and he narrowly escaped execution on several occasions, often thanks to timely interventions from Madero. In spite of his dedication, Villa faced significant challenges, including a 4-month imprisonment in Mexico City, from which he executed a bold escape on Mexican Independence Day. After seeking refuge in El Paso, he swiftly reorganized and established a new army in Chihuahua City. Following a fierce battle, his forces seized Juarez, where Villa took charge, implemented various reforms, and financed his extravagant lifestyle through taxation and legalized enterprises such as gambling and prostitution. While in Juarez, Villa enjoyed a life of luxury, funding his military endeavors with hidden wealth and indulging in lavish items like luxury automobiles and a constant supply of cannabis. He gained considerable fame as Francisco Madero's leading general and even returned control of Chihuahua City to its citizens as a symbolic gesture during Christmas. However, his fortunes began to decline when his former adversary, Venustiano Carranza, ascended to power with support from the United States. Villa's notorious raid on Columbus, New Mexico, triggered a punitive expedition led by General Blackjack Pershing. Although Pershing was unable to capture him, the relentless pursuit depleted Villa's resources and weakened his influence. In a final bid for glory, Villa launched an assault on Juarez, but faced defeat due to his troops being intoxicated and ill-prepared. Ultimately, he retreated to a ranch, where he was assassinated in 1923. His death signified the conclusion of a multifaceted and contentious figure whose legacy continues to spark debate today. Pancho Villa and his Mexican forces significantly influenced cannabis consumption throughout the American West. As the United States underwent rapid growth at the turn of the 20th century, the lawlessness characteristic of the open frontier began to diminish, giving way to structured local governance. The era of the Wild West was coming to a close, along with the previously relaxed attitudes towards cannabis. As cannabis consumption increased across the nation, it became associated with negative stereotypes regarding Mexican individuals. In the 19th century, the term cannabis was predominantly used in newspapers and medical publications. However, by the early 1900s, the term marijuana gained popularity, partly due to anti-cannabis campaigns that emphasized its Mexican origins to stoke anti-immigrant sentiments. The movement to criminalize cannabis is frequently attributed to influential groups with vested interests in undermining hemp production. These entities propagated narratives linking cannabis to violent conduct, particularly among Mexican immigrants. This fear-based rhetoric, combined with pre-existing biases, resulted in state-level restrictions and ultimately led to federal prohibition. In 1937, Harry Anslinger, the U.S. Narcotics Commissioner, presented racially charged testimonies to Congress to support the case for marijuana prohibition. He asserted that marijuana use was widespread among minority groups, especially within Black and Latino communities, and associated it with violence and social unrest. Likewise, Henry J. Finger from California's State Board of Pharmacy voiced concerns regarding cannabis use among immigrants, highlighting its infiltration into white communities. While the anti-cannabis discourse often contained racial implications, the notion that marijuana was criminalized solely due to its association with Mexican immigrants simplifies a more complex issue. Mexico had already enacted a ban on marijuana in 1920, prior to the U.S. federal enforcement of the Marijuana Tax Act in 1937. The apprehensions surrounding cannabis were not solely rooted in racial prejudice, but also in concerns about its potential effects. Before the 1900s, cannabis was mainly acknowledged for its medicinal and industrial applications. By the early 20th century, sensational media coverage began to depict marijuana as a perilous substance associated with violence and mental health issues. A notable example is a 1905 article from the Los Angeles Times, which exaggerated the dangers of marijuana and influenced public opinion. Nevertheless, there is limited historical evidence regarding the actual patterns of marijuana use during this time. Key aspects such as dosage, methods of consumption, and interactions with other substances were largely overlooked, resulting in much of the apprehension surrounding cannabis being based on conjecture rather than empirical evidence. The effects of cannabis consumption varied greatly depending on the method used, whether it was smoking a joint mixed with tobacco or consuming cannabis-infused edibles. By 1936, all states had prohibited recreational use, and the federal government reinforced this ban with the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. Despite these legal restrictions, illicit cannabis use continued until the 1960s, when it experienced a resurgence in popularity, especially among the youth and the hippie movement. Cannabis became a symbol of anti-establishment sentiments and was commonly present at protests against the Vietnam War. However, it remained illegal for all uses. In 1970, cannabis was completely banned under the Controlled Substances Act, following the Supreme Court's 1969 ruling in Leary v. United States, which invalidated the Marijuana Tax Act. In the context of the Wild West, cannabis played various roles, evolving from a medicinal treatment utilized by immigrant laborers to a recreational substance linked to outlaws and cowboys. Its trajectory across the frontier reflects broader societal transformations, oscillating between acceptance and prohibition. Although cannabis faced criminalization for a significant portion of the 20th century, 24 states have since lifted their bans, with an additional 14 permitting its use solely for medicinal purposes. Cannabis in contemporary America is vastly different from its status in the late 19th century. As society grapples with the intricacies of cannabis regulation and evolving attitudes, its historical importance during the Wild West period stands as a compelling testament to its cultural influence. The plant's capacity to adjust to and shape the communities in which it exists underscores its lasting significance in both historical and present-day scenarios.